Rhatigan. Now, Patrick is the CEO of Team 10G, a company that helps B2B businesses generate revenue opportunities through bespoke sales frameworks designed specifically for their needs. On average, 10G's customers increase their qualified opportunities by 3x and new business calls by 220%. Patrick, how you doing today?
I'm great, Phillip. How can I not be well with an introduction like that?
Come on now, man. It's actually, I'm glad we're talking because sales is something that every business knows they need to double down on, increase, optimize, you name it, right? But it's not always the thing that's the easiest, especially to get your talent to do that in-house or work with someone who can do that. So how did you get to this place yourself? Do you have a career, a whole background where you were in sales and it just always made sense to you? Or was it also a struggle for you when you unlocked what you think makes sense and then decided to found that company?
That's a great question. There's a great thing, I think, it's great salespeople are found, not taught. And you can definitely train people to get to a certain level in sales, but I find, at least in my experience, they're really executing salespeople, they're really impressive overachievers, have always been natural born sellers. And I think I kind of fall into that bucket. From a young age, I was starting businesses and having people work with me. I used to mow lawns in my local neighborhood, and then I bought an extra lawnmower and got some people to work with me on that. So I've always been kind of a rally the troops and get people excited around an idea. But 10G really came to fruition when I landed in New York I'm going to show my age here, Phillip, almost 10 years ago. And I had been trading currencies before I arrived in New York and decided that I wanted to apply my sort of analytical brain to a more, a more revenue driving focus for startups. And very long story short, I got involved in a small ad tech startup in New York, and I essentially decided, hey, I will go no salary, I'll take equity in the business, and I'll take a visa to get to stay in the country. So that was really my big sort of goal, was to get an opportunity to stay in the United States. So I arrived, and within 12 weeks, I figured out a way I sold myself into a job to get a visa. So fast forward a couple of months and got that company to north of $3 million in transactions in about 6 months. And that allowed me to hit the threshold and come across to the States, which was a great achievement, right? I was very excited about it. But what I very quickly realized was when I landed in New York, it's probably one of the worst cities in the world to not earn a salary. So I very quickly started reaching out to companies that fell into a similar bucket as Please Advise, the tech company that I was working with. And this is, by the way, Phil, this is 10 years ago, right? So this is when people weren't as open to sort of admitting their shortcomings in any realm. It was a very sort of macho babble kind of, we have to pretend that we are the strongest front and we know everything that we need to know to be a successful business. So I reached out to a couple of these CEOs just saying, hey, we've just developed a process in the past couple of months and it's yielded X, Y results. Is that something you'd be interested in learning more about? And I really thought I might get one or two side hustle clients that would pay my bills and keep my roof over my head on the sofa I was sleeping on the Upper West Side. And before I realized this, the response was just overwhelming. Every single CEO I reached out to was, at a very primitive level, excited to get some kind of free tips and tricks. But more often than not, people are like, yeah, this is something we're actively trying to solve at the moment, and we can't find a good salesperson that we can afford and trust, and we're just in a position where we don't have a ton of cash to throw at this initiative. So yeah, let's talk. And it made me realize that there was an entire subset of businesses that are just being left by the wayside, who really have like incredible potential and more often than not amazing ideas, but just don't have the right sales team to actually execute on it. So very long story short, 10G was built to champion SMBs. It was built to level the playing field. It was built to essentially turn around and say, the $1.2 or $1.3 million sales budget that you need to have a team that's going to produce a decent amount of revenue for on a year-over-year basis, that is not a possibility for you right now. But what if I could give you that same caliber of team at a fraction of the price, fraction of the commitment, and all the leadership that you need to make sure that you're not only getting the funnel full, but you're executing on the deals. And that's really where 10G came to fruition.
I love that. I mean, even from the beginning of your story, when you struck a deal to to jump in on commission with equity and a visa,
Yeah.
you could just see the salesperson in you navigating through life. And you're right. That's something that has to just come from who you are as a person. You're like, okay, I'll be fair. Here's what I think I can do for you, and here's what I expect in return. And most people often than not come from two different places when they're in a position like that, right? Either they're overly pleasing, like, please, what do you need from me? What can I do? Or the opposite, like, I don't need this. I'll figure something else out, right? Which is an inverted form of the please, I need this,
Mhm.
right? But you came at it from a different way of thinking, okay, let me see what would be valuable to you, and where does that stand? How much leverage do I have? These are all just things you were doing based on who you are and how you grew up. Do you come from a family of entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I come from a very long line of entrepreneurs. My uncles have all built and run successful businesses. Some of them still do. My dad was the same. He built and ran a successful business. I think of all, God, maybe put me on the spot, but my entire extended family, I think they either all work for themselves or for some iteration of a business that started in the family somehow. Now they all went off and did their own thing independently and earned their stripes, because that's the way my family are. Is that you have to justify your involvement and make sure that you're driving value. But it was an incredibly entrepreneurial environment that I grew up in. I think that's really stood to me.
I really love that. I think there's a lot of takeaways from something like that, because you then bring this energy, right? This lineage energy over here, and you clearly see something in sales that many don't see. And it could just be, it's not just that you see it, it's just it's who you are, and you're that channel that allows that to open, because then you see the floodgates open and everyone's like, yes, we need this. You're like, okay, well, just understand you're not my only client. So I can't give you the full commitment, but you can't get the full team. That's what I love about the idea of 10G, because it's needed. So where do, because there's a lot of courses now, and indulge me here, there's a lot of courses that talk about, oh, cold sales doesn't work, like you have to play the long game, develop your audience, understand who they are, build a relationship. Are those all, I mean, without giving too much any trade secrets or anything away, because obviously that's your bread and butter, but is there a perspective that's skewed that most businesses do not seem to understand in their approach to sales? Because I mean, you jump on LinkedIn and you'll get any number of messages of, hey, I build mobile apps, blah, blah, blah. And they didn't even take a time to say hello. So I'll be honest, for me, that's like, wow. But if the solution is great, I guess it doesn't matter. How do you see this?
Yeah, that's a really great point that you bring up, Philip, because what you just touched on there with the LinkedIn messages, that's a really, really good pinpoint example of what separates us from the pack. So as you said, there's a lot of people in the space that are deploying these spray and pray tactics where they'll send one email to 50,000 people and hope something sticks and they'll get a meeting for their client. But the real differentiator comes from, and this is where 10G stands from the pack, is we have identified and very, very consistently made a concerted effort to be on top of industry trends. And what you just mentioned with LinkedIn is a prime example, where people are doing these sort of cookie cutter, copy and paste messages, spamming people, which is obviously damaging LinkedIn's ecosystem in and of itself, because you can't be protected from someone sending you a connection request, for example. So what we decided to do, and we tested this theory manually for a long time, we decided to build a process that allowed us to create an authentic communication strategy and a real connection with prospects on an individual scale. So if we were to take the example of LinkedIn that you referenced earlier, and someone starts off the message, they don't even say hello, they don't introduce themselves, they're just straight into the pitch, like, when can you talk? When can you give me your money? You're going to get 55,000 of those in a day, and you're just going to spin right past all of them. Our messages don't get overlooked. Not because we are the smartest people in the room or we're reinventing the wheel, but we've taken enough time to step back and realize what's important. And that's time, right? That's other people's time is as valuable as your own. And if we look at it through that lens, you realize the importance of, well, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to research Phillip for 5 minutes. And I'm going to check, like, what's his background? What company is he working on at the moment? What ideas has he been successful with in the past? And we actively encourage our salespeople to go down those rabbit holes and find the most intricate, interesting little piece of information on that prospect that you couldn't possibly pull out of thin air or templatize, and use that as essentially a carrot to say, hey, I know you're busy, but you see here that I've taken time to research you. I'm referencing a publication that you were referenced in, or I'm alluding to your previous job, or the fact that you're just a couple of months in this new role. And by the way, these are all tips that I'd recommend any salespeople do. But when you put the time in, you do see the return. Now, the real difference is, how scalable is it to be able to turn around and research every prospect on an individualized basis? The answer is, it's not scalable at all, unless you build something to make it scalable, which is what we've done. So we identified the importance of this about 3.5 years ago, the importance of personalizing messages, and tested our theories and proved the concept, and the lift was enormous. Once again, not reinventing the wheel. We're just speaking with people how we would like to be spoken to. So we decided we build this process out, proved the concept, and then we built an entire artificial intelligence and natural language processing suite that is patent pending. It's custom to our business. No one else has it. And that allows us to not only aggregate information at a rate that nobody else can compete with, but it also allows us to curate and produce highly personalized, highly bespoke copy that speaks to a prospect on an individual level. But we can do it at scale. So that's something that we're really proud of.
Absolutely, as you should be. That's exciting stuff. And do you only work with people in New York, or do you work remotely as well across the states?
We are entirely US based, but we believe that talent needs to be treated in a way that will retain them. And we found that having an office was great. We had a beautiful office on Park Avenue before COVID, which thankfully we don't have anymore. We hope to get it again once offices reopen. But we also had some spaces in San Francisco and Austin, Houston, Boulder. And we realized that a lot of the good talent that is interested in working in an organization like ours, because look, Phillip, it's not for everyone, right? It's very consultative, and you really have to think on your feet a lot of the time. But by having a wide net that we can work in and building a nice remote environment, we've been able to snap up talent that, frankly, I don't know we would have been able to attain if we didn't have that sort of malleable structure of being remote as well.
There's so many critical aspects to what it is that you do. As they say, sales is the lifeblood of a business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you've been able to create a solution and define what kind of talent ultimately is the kind of talent that should be in your pool to execute on your behalf under your name of 10G. It's such an undertaking, but also an accomplishment and a contribution to business as a whole. Often you see a lot of people start businesses and they're sort of iterations, but they're more, you can just tell what I'm trying to say is there's no way someone would start a business like this if they weren't truly passionate about just the idea of sales. And that's really hard to come by. It's because it's the most important crux. You could have all the great marketing, all the great messaging, and all the greatest products. Like you said, there's a lot of companies out there that have these great ideas and they're not able to get out there into the market. So there's no cash flow. So then they die off, or what knows, who knows what. But here you are really championing that and giving SMBs a chance to compete with the big players who have limitless budgets and just, they throw spaghetti at the wall. Eventually it sticks. I really appreciate that. Is that your mission? Do you have a specific goal in mind for the future of 10G and like where you want this to go post pandemic and onward?
Yeah, so at our core, we wanted to champion those SMBs. So just to backpedal a little bit, before I started 10G as it is today, I had a previous consulting firm called NTR Consulting. It was the same business, but on a much smaller scale. And that was what spun out of my working for equity and a visa situation in New York. That was really the beginning. But what really opened my eyes was when I was working as a consultant in that business, I sat down with one or two businesses in particular where they had phenomenal products, like phenomenal. And I would actively want their products if they were still around today, but they're not. And the only reason they're not is because they were technical co-founders who were exceptional at building products, but they didn't understand the minutia of selling. They didn't understand how to develop their ICP, or how to create messaging that resonated with prospects, or how to create marketing collateral that resonated. And the only thing standing in their way was the fact that they didn't have $1, $2, $3 million to pump into sales and marketing. And it, frankly, it broke my heart, because from my perspective, and I remember vividly getting in a car, driving back to the airport in Detroit to fly back to New York, and thinking to myself, that's the last time I'm going to see that company as a whole. And they don't even realize it yet, but they're about 2 weeks away from collapsing. And they're just so lost in the fact that their back's against the wall, they have no money to invest in sales, and they're just not making good decisions. And that was the moment where I really thought to myself, well, if there was a way to leverage my knowledge and skill set to provide these companies with a really highly trained, executing upper funnel sales team, what impact would that have on their ability to produce revenue for their company? And what impact would that have on their ability to pay more salaries and take bonuses? And I generally don't look beyond that and think, well, they might get a big acquisition or a huge merger. I like to focus on what small incremental difference is our effort going to have on their business on a day-to-day basis. And we built the offering around that. So I am very hands-on with any one of our clients that wants guidance on an executive level around sales, or we've been fortunate enough to just launch our own little private equity division of the business where we're actively investing in companies now. And that's all to really stay true and pin ourselves to our mission statement of championing those SMBs and making sure that the people who have those good ideas are given the opportunity to at least try and succeed, as opposed to just being wiped out of the race from the get-go because they don't have a mountain of cash behind them.
See, that's the kind of story right there that shows the difference between you and the person and your company and your team, and that one person just spray and pray, on LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. It's that key sense of mission. The fact that you even had that experience and that thought was consequential enough to you to consider it a moment where you said, man, too bad. I wish I could have helped. Most other people don't even get to have that opportunity because they're just sitting there sending a cookie cutter message and didn't actually contact and connect to experience where that company is, at what stage they're in, and what does it imply, and what are the consequences of whether they choose to work with them or not. And those are the moments that I think that truly define the history of a business, is when they have those kinds of conversations. And all that is missed by every single person making the effort to sell by just sending some cookie cutter thing out there. That exact moment, because at the end of the day, behind a business, regardless of technology, is a person. And that's somebody's, dream business, or they inherited it, or they stepped into a role and they're trying to solve these problems. And they need to be in front of the people like you who are ready to deliver on that, who's taken the time to identify the pain points, to identify tools that can overcome those obstacles, given the right conditions, and develop techniques and strategies to create those conditions for success. All of that coming together is the perfect recipe for success, win-win, and contribution to society as a whole. And it's just insane to me that people don't operate in this way. That's why I love what I do, and I get to talk to business owners like you who step into that role, because I'll be frank, my weakness is sales. I don't know why. Everyone always says I would be great at it, and there's probably things about my personality that help that, but I can't bring myself to just pretend to have a relationship with someone if I don't have any actual intention of, you know what I mean? And so that's why I love so much what you do, man. I really look up to what you've been able to accomplish.
I really appreciate that. And you know what, that says a lot about you as an individual. And that's what I look for in salespeople, is a very strong moral compass and understanding that sometimes no deal is better than a bad deal. And you kind of alluded to this earlier, but there has been a history of sort of somewhat predatory practices by efficient sellers using their quote unquote skills for evil. But at the end of the day, what we really look for internally, and I think the reason we've been so successful as a business, is staying true to that mission statement of wanting to really guide those small to medium-sized companies. But not only that, we select our clients as carefully as they select us. So we will have a lot of different companies that are like, yeah, we're ready to sign the term sheet, we agree on the pricing, and we're ready to rock and roll. And I will step in and say, look, culturally, there's not a fit here. I know where your expectations are, and we're aligned right now, but I can tell by your responses to some of our questions that you may not necessarily be a perfect fit for our type of communication style. And if I think that my team are going to be put in a position where they're being over leveraged or treated any less respectfully than they should be, we just won't take the deal. And I think that's what's allowed us to scale the business. And we're bootstrapped, right? So we've never had to respond to any investor demands or any sort of like pressure from above. So we've been able to be that selective group. And I think that's like really holistically helped us to stay true to what our goal was. And yeah, I think you really touched on a point there. It's important to have that strong moral driver when you're actually writing a deal across the line.
I would even add to that any good sales company is bootstrapped, because their whole effort and point of existing is that they can get the money themselves. And I mean, that's not to say that you can't later receive money, but like the origins of it, that's just that's such a badge there. That's almost like the first badge you put on to your uniform when you say, yeah, and all of this was built from doing what we say that we do, which is selling.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited to share 10G with everybody, and the listener that's on right now, right? They want to know what social channel, what website should they go to? Where are you active, Patrick? How can they get a hold and connect with you as well?
Yeah, that's great. We have our website, which is team10g.com. On that, there's actually a podcast where I have a couple of episodes talking about different sort of elements of sales. We also have a blog that kind of gives some tips and tricks on the sales ecosystem. But frankly, any listeners that are even looking to just have a conversation about their process, or they want to just they want an audit done of their outbound process, I am more than happy to dedicate the time, and any free time I have to spare, I always try and put it back into the industry and the space. So I'm very contactable on LinkedIn, and I can give you a couple pieces of my own personal information you can put on the post so people can reach out.
I'm looking forward to this. I really am. And we've reached a point in the conversation where I always ask people to indulge me in this, and I hope that you do too, as we begin to close things out. And that's, given everything we covered here today, if you had the opportunity to invite anybody to have joined us today, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
It's a really good question. And I think I'd have to choose my dad. Unfortunately, both my parents are passed now, but my dad passed when I was 16, so he didn't really get to see any of my evolution into the business world. But he was a through and through entrepreneur as well. And I think I learned all of the vast majority of my good characteristics from him, like a strong moral compass and driving value in the industry and helping people get what they need to get, and really focusing on making sure that whatever you're doing, you do it to the best of your ability, and you also make sure that you feel good about what you're doing. And that's really the key. I feel like I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for the lessons that I learned, even in those short 16 years that I had with them. So yeah, if I could have anyone sitting beside me right now, it'd be my dad to hear some of the successes that we've had. And I'm sure he's heard them and he's watching over us. But yeah, I think that would be who I'd ask.
Absolutely. What was your father's name?
No, and funny actually, my first business, NTR Consulting, was named after my dad, Noel Thomas Rhatigan.
I love that. Oh man. Yeah, I mean, the lineage lives on, and if it's anything like what I see through my eyes, I'm sure he would be proud and happy. It really was a pleasure getting to talk to you, getting to know you, meet with you. I hope this isn't the last time we chat. I'm gonna connect with you after this call and see how we can stay in touch, and hopefully maybe even work together. I meet a lot of people, and I think it makes sense. You're just somebody who needs to be put in front of people who could use that. So thank you so much, Patrick, for stopping by. Again, can we reiterate the website again? It's team10g.com.
Team10g.com.
All right. Well, there you have it, ladies and gents. Patrick Rhatigan.